And I would much rather have the phone call of, hey, I might be going to New Orleans to do this, rather than getting the phone call, Nick, my dick's gone.
What do I do?
What do you mean it's gone? I woke up. It was there last night when I checked. I woke up this morning. It's not there now.
It's gone. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Shadows and Sightings, the paranormal podcast where we talk about all things spooky. I'm Taylor.
I'm Nick.
And today we are recording on Super Bowl Sunday. Super Bowl is being held in New Orleans this year.
Oh, is it really?
It is.
I didn't know that.
I figured you probably didn't put two and two together on why we're discussing the topic we're doing today. But I figured since it's Super Bowl Sunday, we'd be a little bit on brand with what we were recording. So we're doing a little bit of New Orleans history with the topic of voodoo and voodoo magic, voodoo religion, all that good stuff. Voodoo is one of those things that you kind of hear about. I mean, if you've ever been to New Orleans, it's definitely prominent in a lot of the aspects in the city.
So talk about that. So you've been there multiple times.
I've been there multiple times, but I only remember like one of the trips.
Sure.
Because it was 2018 that I was in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And it is definitely, I don't want to say it's not ingrained into the city because it is, but it's definitely become more of a tourist thing. People,
sure.
It's a tourist trap for, there's like voodoo shops where you can walk in, and of course they don't let you take any pictures or anything like that. But yeah. I think the one we went to was Mr. Zombie's House of Voodoo or Dr. Zombie's House of Voodoo, something along those lines. Super cool store. Like if you get a chance to go there, it's really neat. I mean, you have like the bones and the shrunken heads and not real ones, obviously,
sure.
It was really a neat place, but it's definitely one of those tourist things where when you go to New Orleans, it's like, oh, let's go see somebody do voodoo and do a voodoo ritual and this and that. And it's like the actual participants of actually practice it is like less than 1% in Louisiana. So
you're saying it's like a tourist trap now, essentially. I wonder how many,
think of how like Salem is for witches.
Yeah, basically the same concept. I wonder how many of those practitioners though are like annoyed. Because like you and I, like if we're not entrenched in voodoo, if we don't know like what real voodoo is compared to
what we see on what we were just talking about before we started recording, Hollywood and pop culture, like we could walk into a voodoo shop and he could be chanting all this shit. It could be like complete gibberish. We wouldn't know. I have no idea.
So I wonder how many of those in New Orleans that they're doing that. They're just like, it's just nonsense.
Well, from what I gathered, from what I got from the research, most of the actual voodoo practitioners in New Orleans, New Orleans is interesting in that fact that it has like subsections. You have like the 7th Ward, 8th Ward, 9th Ward, etc. Most of the voodoo practitioners live in the 7th Ward, and that's away from like Bourbon Street and the gardens and stuff like that. So
is that like the ghetto or no?
I don't want to say that, but yeah.
No, I'm saying no. We got that. I'm just
Those
saying,
are the low income places.
Saying,
yes.
Is it the quote unquote the rougher part? I guess. Okay.
But so I think they kind of keep that out of the public, like actual practicing.
Sure,
they keep that away from the public, tourist traps, as it were. But the one thing I am most familiar with for voodoo, since I'm a Saints fan, in 2001, they actually had a voodoo priestess come into the Superdome during a pregame of a Saints game and do a voodoo ritual on the 50-yard line because the Saints were so bad. So they brought the voodoo priest in to expunge the negative spirits surrounding the Saints. And I think they actually went on to go to the playoffs that year after she did that. Yeah. So they got some luck turned around. And then, of course, Hurricane Katrina happened and I think washed all that away because it was right back to being really bad. Yeah. But then Drew Brees came to town and the rest is history.
He got you guys the Super Bowl win.
He sure did.
Him and Sean Payton got the Super Bowl win.
Sure did. Yeah. I wore a Saints jersey every day to school after they won the Super Bowl.
You did. I remember that. That was the happiest I'd ever seen you.
No, I'm still chasing that high 15 years later.
Yeah. I was like, you're like, you got to come over and watch Super Bowl with me. I'm like, all right, I'll be there.
And you didn't because we got a huge snowstorm that year. I watched the Super Bowl with Adam alone at our dad's house because it was 4 feet of snow outside.
Was it really?
Yeah.
I remember watching.
We were off school for like 2 weeks.
Was that when that was?
Yeah.
I remember watching something with you.
Yeah, because we had a huge blizzard, and then once they got the roads cleared, it iced. Like the snow drifted over, iced it, and then snowed again, and then iced again, and then snowed again.
What year was this?
2010.
Oh yeah, okay, that blizzard. Okay, yeah. I do remember that because I was working at UPS. No, I couldn't have been. We must have had two blizzards then, because if it was 2010, we were still in school.
Mm-hmm. It was the waning months, the waning months of our graduation.
Yeah, okay. Gotcha.
It's our senior year.
Then I think like 2 years later we had another blizzard, because I remember
could have been
going to work, and work was like closed.
Yeah,
which was crazy because like UPS never closes for anything, but they shut it down because it was that bad. So
oof. Yeah, that blizzard, man, that gave me ample time to celebrate, and I was going to go to New Orleans for the Super Bowl parade, but then every airport was closed. So no way I was getting there unless I was driving, but good times. So happy Super Bowl Sunday to everybody out there who celebrates. I really don't give a shit about the Super Bowl this year. I don't like the Chiefs. I don't like the Eagles. It's all fucking rigged.
I really hate the Chiefs.
I do really hate the Chiefs. If you're a Chiefs fan out there listening to this podcast, I'm so sorry for the Chiefs slander, but fuck Patrick Mahomes, fuck Travis Kelce. I hate them both. I hate the refs for helping them so much. And fuck the Eagles too. Let's not leave them out. Fuck the Eagles too.
What do we do? Nothing.
Just fuck each other.
Just negative. Just hate.
I do like Saquon Barkley. I'll give him that.
He's cool.
I do like him.
He's cool.
But anyways, you're not much of a football fan, right? You were like into it for like a little bit. You're like off and on with it.
Yeah, it comes in phases. Like I was watching a couple of games like here and there, keeping up with Pittsburgh and the Commanders now, because those are probably the only two teams that I really could care about. But what's his face looks like he's going to get the boot. The coach for Pittsburgh.
No, they'll never fire Mike Tomlin.
No. That's. I keep seeing things about like his job is on the line or whatever, and I thought it was interesting. I saw that he was still the coach, and I was like, "Oh, damn, he's still there." I thought he would have left. But yeah, and then the Commanders, they actually did pretty decent. I'm thinking here with the next couple, I could see them going to a Super Bowl.
Yes, sir. I would like that.
That would be awesome.
I'm a big Jaden Daniels fan.
Yeah, so. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. I thought the chips would have all fell into place. We could have got a Ravens Commanders Super Bowl, and it would have just been a. Jeez, could you imagine this area with a
Ravens? Oh my gosh, that'd be freaking lit.
We might not be far off from that. You never know.
Yeah, that would be crazy.
That would be
Washington and Baltimore. Oh my god,
the battle for the Super
Bowl. That'd be so cool.
So tell me, Nick, do you have any preconceptions or anything about Voodoo that you ever had in your brain, or anything New Orleans related?
Yeah, so my first, I guess, exposure, if you want to call it that, to Voodoo was when I was in college. I took an elective course for witchcraft and Appalachian like folklore and stuff like that. And we had a chapter each like week on different, like, I don't want to say non-tradition religion, because I feel like everybody's religion is like traditional to them in some way. Mm-hmm. But
it could have been like a pagan religion where it's not widely practiced.
When I say non-tradition, I mean outside of like the traditional quote unquote organized
like
religions, Christianity, Catholicism, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So one of the
who said zoology?
Zoology. Yeah, no.
What is the Jewish?
Judaism.
Judaism. That's
Judaism.
Right.
Yep.
Like, what is it? I couldn't think of it.
Yeah, Judaism, and so that was like my first exposure to Voodoo. I had to watch a bunch of videos and things like that. So some of the things that I saw in that, and what I did in our research, for this, was kind of like a refresher on some of the things that we covered. Mm-hmm. And then I learned some new things. I didn't know, like, talking to you about the voodoo dolls.
Yeah.
I had no idea. That's like one, I guess, ignorant preconceived notion on my part.
Hey, me too. I didn't know until I started doing research either.
Because, like American Horror Story, like the season Coven or whatever, was season 2 or 3 or whatever.
See, I've never watched American Horror Story, so I have no dog in that race to know what they were talking about voodoo wise.
The whole premise of that season, it's like the Salem, not specifically Salem, but like that field of witchcraft, versus voodoo practice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's like the whole scene. It's just like you have the New Orleans voodoo practitioners and the witches there, and they're like fighting against each other.
Oh,
and
man.
it's like
Okay, I might have to watch this then.
It's pretty good. Coven was my second favorite compared to Asylum, but in that, there's a lot of voodoo dolls and stuff in that.
Yeah.
But no, it was a refresher. Other preconceived notions. I'm gonna say I already had like any other preconceived notions. It's so cool to me how it's such a prominent religion, yet it's so unorganized. It's like organized chaos, essentially.
Yeah, it really is. We were talking a little bit. It's like one of those few religions where there's no real right way to practice it. There's no real right way of learning the history of it because it's so ambiguous, so diverse. Because it comes from West Africa, moves from West Africa to like the Caribbean, like Haiti, and then from Haiti moves into New Orleans because it's a huge port town, and of course it was a huge, part of the slave trade.
Yep.
And that mixed with Roman Catholicism, and it's just a big melting pot.
There's a term for that. It's called syncretism. And that's essentially voodoo is like the embodiment of syncretism, where it's the practice of combining different beliefs and various schools of thoughts all into like one collective body. So
it's crazy.
Like the saints, like the Catholicism and stuff like that. And, they're not want to say they're picking and choosing, but it's like they're keeping this from like their traditional African roots. Mm-hmm. They're pulling this from, Catholicism. So the saints, and we'll kind of get into it, how a lot of the deities and the Loa that they worship are essentially embodiments of the saints. Like there's like a saint.
There's a saint counterpart.
Yeah, exactly. Like this. And of course, like
Spanish religion, like Spanish,
it's kind
French,
of pulled into that. Yeah,
because again, the Louisiana Purchase, it was owned by French before, and then it was Spain, and then the United States owned it.
Yep.
And it's just it's crazy how many different cultures. And if you ever go to New Orleans, that's like why it's one of the most interesting towns to go visit, because it's literally everything you can imagine a melting pot being is there. You have African, Irish, French, Spanish, United States, any kind of Creole, all that stuff is all just in New Orleans mixing together, and it just creates this unbelievable like atmosphere. I guess
food
is
so good.
Food is off the charts, man.
The food is
you
so
have not
great.
lived until you've had a fresh shrimp po' boy in New Orleans, just sitting there, and you see them wheel the fresh shrimp in right off the Gulf and into the fryer. Oh man, make sure you get it fully dressed, because that's the only way to eat it.
It's fun. Unrelated, kind of semi-related, I guess, but I was talking to my grandma, and one time, and I had no idea. I was like, Grandma, so tell me, like, where was your family, like, grandma from? I was thinking they were all from Panama or whatever. Mm-hmm. Apparently, like, my great-grandmother, I guess, or her grandmother, was from Haiti. So she was like, so we actually come from, like, Haitian descent. And she met, my other grandfather, I guess, when they were building the canal, maybe that's how they like ended up in Panama.
Oh, okay.
But she was like, my grandmother was from Haiti, my grandfather was from like Sicily or something like that, and they ended up here, and then we generations of Panamanians afterwards. So I thought that, which I'm not surprised, because a lot of like my family they're more of like darker skin, where they look like they could be from like Africa, or like Haiti, because they're very dark skin.
Right.
And you go to Panama, you see like very dark skin, look like they could come from Africa or like Ghana or something like that. And then you have other groups of people where they kind of look like, lighter skin, brunette, not like traditional like African hairstyles, but so it's very diverse. Mm-hmm. So. And then the Catholicism is like huge over there. So I was like, I can kind of see where this is kind of like all coming together now.
Yeah.
It's pretty. So yeah, the diversity.
It's interesting to see the melting pot in action.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Now I want a po' boy.
So sorry, man.
Shrimp po' boy.
So good.
Where can I go to get one of those around here?
That's a good question. I mean, you can go probably just about anywhere and get a po' boy, but whether or not it's a good one is a different story altogether. Best advice I can give you is just make your own.
Yeah,
probably. Get some fresh shrimp, some Zatarain's fish the fish crumbs or the fish breading.
I'm surprised
seafood
Popeyes
breading.
doesn't have that.
You'd think they would.
A po' boy, like
and then just get yourself some French bread, and then you just fry your shrimp, and then fully dressed is lettuce, tomato, mayonnaise, pickles, hot sauce.
All right.
All right, I'm convinced. Let me just Amazon some fresh shrimp.
What about you? Any preconceived notions for voodoo on your part?
I don't know if I had any preconceived notions, but I definitely was in the realm of it being more of a superstitious practice, I guess.
I can see that, yeah.
Like I said, the New Orleans, the saints had the priestess come in and expunge the evil spirits away. That's why I always thought it was more of like not a religion of sorts, but more of a magical practice, kind of like witchcraft. Where, they're, after doing some research, they're not too far apart, but not so much in the herbal sense of it, the natural sense, but definitely the spooky. Here comes the shaman with the, and when you think of the voodoo person, like I was saying earlier, you think of his name's Baron Samedi, and he's the classic skeleton face guy with the top hat and the cane, smoking the cigar, with a long trench coat. He's the deity of the undead. So he kind of, and I didn't know this until just recently, he's actually more of a, what would you call him?
Middleman.
Not so much a middleman, but like when you think of like a toll person almost. Like so you die, you go to almost like a waiting room. Think like Beetlejuice. You're waiting in this waiting room.
Purgatory.
Kind of purgatory.
So like the ferryman on the river Styx for like Greek mythology.
Yeah. Like
ferries
that.
you across, you give him a coin if you don't have it. Yeah. Okay.
So he's like kind of that guy that leads you to, and then you reconnect with your ancestors, but you're in like this waiting period until because there's no heaven and no hell in voodoo religion.
That's how he's depicted in American Horror Story. One of the main characters, this lady in there, she's like completely evil. She ends up dying. Spoiler alert. And she wakes up.
Spoiler alert after the spoiler happens.
She wakes up in. Oh wow, it's like I'll come back from that. Because the Axeman, like the Louisiana Axeman, he shows up in it.
Okay.
Somehow gets like reincarnated into like modern day, society, and she ends up like dating him, and it's just like this terrible abusive relationship. And then she ends up dying, and is like reliving this like hell of being in like this just toxic entrenchment with this guy.
Yeah. And
Baron Samedi shows up, and it's like purgatory. It's like, this isn't really heaven or hell. Like, this is just where you're going to be for the rest of eternity.
Yeah,
like,
it's where you are, and
suck it.
Yeah.
Like, you can't do anything about it. Basically, is what it is. And she just keeps waking up to this like nightmare reality and like no memory of. Oh god, it's just awful.
Damn, I'm gonna have to watch that.
It should. It's really good. So with voodoo, then we have voodoo being. It's just a very general term. Mm-hmm. We know that it all comes from. Its roots come from like West Africa, Ghana, and then with the slave trade,
with a religion called Vodun.
Yeah, it kind of stems from a religion called Vodun. Of course, with the slave trade between the 16th and 19th century, it kind of starts spreading around to the Western world. And
the first enslaved Africans being brought to Louisiana in 1719.
Yep. And then from there, we start seeing these different embodiments of voodoo. We also see that Louisiana voodoo is like different from Haitian voodoo, which is different from like West African, like
traditional
Vodun or whatever. Yeah. Where, like you said, it's kind of a melting pot where what might be common in Haitian voodoo
such
could be
as
the same,
such as like animal sacrifice.
Sure,
that's I think that's a big common one in Haitian voodoo.
Is it? Okay,
I believe so. Or at least sacrifice of some kind.
Are the implications the same? Like, meaning the significance of a sacrifice in Haitian voodoo, is it the same significance in like Louisiana voodoo?
Well, I don't think Louisiana voodoo has sacrifices.
It doesn't? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's just one of the aspects. Like, you can do a sacrifice in Haitian voodoo, and that's one thing that you practice. But Louisiana voodoo, that sacrifice could be something completely different. It could be sacrificing. I don't know if it's so much a sacrifice, but I was doing some research on Marie Laveau, and she apparently believed that the more pain that you inflicted on yourself or suffering, the deities would have sympathy for you, and that would be what calls out to the spirits. So if you punish yourself, she allegedly put some hot peppers, or what they called hot peppers, I think they put them in a fire, and then you had to put them in your mouth, and that would like just cause self-torture essentially. And that would call out to the deities that you were ready to be presented with some sort of power to call upon them. So that might be their version of a sacrifice in Louisiana voodoo, as opposed to Haitian voodoo, where it's like, oh, I'm going to kill a chicken and sacrifice it to the gods. Or I don't know if human sacrifices were so much a thing in Haitian voodoo, but
sure. So okay, and so from that regard, that's one way where they differ essentially.
Correct.
So one form of voodoo in Haiti has implications for sacrifice, but then that doesn't even completely exist in Louisiana voodoo.
Right.
There are similarities though as well that it looks like. One thing that I found was, which is common in pretty much all religions, and they're like the use of charms, and amulets, and talismans, which is called a gris-gris. And it's a cloth bag that's worn by an individual to ward off evil spirits. Sometimes it contains a cloth, material, writings, that have different symbolic messages. It's also used as a form of birth control, which I thought was interesting. So yeah, like female, like women, they'll wear these. Maybe males wear them too for birth control. I don't know. But in Haiti, that's actually practiced pretty regularly, and it's seen as like a positive thing to use it. However, in Louisiana voodoo, the use of gris-gris is actually seen as like black magic, and like it's considered like a quote unquote like a bad thing, where it's used to kind of like inflict damage onto somebody or bring somebody like ill fortune. And there's historical records of people, destroying a gris-gris, carving it, drowning it or whatever, which I thought was interesting because it's kind of like akin to the traditional sense of what a voodoo doll is. So I'm maybe you put the name of somebody in this gris-gris and then you drown it or you cut it up or whatever like that to kind of invoke, ill will towards,
right.
Whoever.
Essentially, you're cursing the object.
Yeah, it's like a curse or whatever.
To follow up on that, one example would be to curse the object and then put it in somebody's pillowcase or in their pillow, unbeknownst to them, hoping that it would curse them in some sort of a way.
So those are like a lot of like the differences that, depending on which school of thought of voodoo you're kind of looking at, that's really like the outcome of it. But the more common thing it seems to be amongst like all of the schools of voodoo is that, like you said, there's no central authority. In Louisiana voodoo, there's no orthodoxy of like controlled higher ups that
right.
Catholicism has like the cardinals or whatever, and the Pope. None of that exists.
Yeah.
And
essentially, you're calling out to deities based in African legend and African lore, but they are, like you said, they're synchronous with Roman Catholic saints. So you're trying to find a balance between the saints and the deities that your ancestors probably would have prayed to or tried to summon. I guess summon is the correct term. Reach out to in a spiritual way and trying to find that common ground.
Which I think in voodoo, what you're referring to are what are called the Loa. Loa are believed to bridge the gap between humans and Bondi, which like in traditional Vodun, Bondi is like it's like God essentially. And I think in Louisiana voodoo, that's where we have, individuals like Baron Samedi, Papa Legba, where you would make offerings to these individuals and you're kind of reaching out to them and they're essentially playing like the middleman between, humans and like God. They're like embodiments or messengers essentially.
Right.
And depending on which deity or Loa, I think they actually refer to them as spirits. Mm-hmm. Like they're not gods. They're more like just spirits or whatever. I say they, when I mean like practitioners, but for example, Legba, he's often viewed as grandfather-like figure. So a lot of kids, in the practices of voodoo, see him as this like elderly figure, and he kind of looks after these kids. Gray-haired, simple, just a warm grandpa figure, I guess.
Right.
Straw hat, smoking a pipe. He has
sounds like a cool dude to hang out with on the weekend.
He has like a walking cane. He likes candy, so I'm assuming that offerings to him involve like candy essentially, and his role is to kind of keep the kids busy while the more serious rituals are going on.
To kind of go off what you said, the saints are described as servants and messengers of the ancestors. So they're essentially taking their ancestors, and the saints are moving between the spirit realms and the ancestral plane. I'll call it the ancestral plane. That sounds pretty cool.
I want to live there.
It's like Sovngarde in Skyrim.
Sovngarde, or like the space in between spaces.
Valhalla.
Yeah. Valhalla, like the astral plane.
So imagine you have Valhalla, Sovngarde or, heaven, whatever you want to call it. And then you have the messengers being in modern practicing of voodoo, or at least Louisiana voodoo, the saints are the messengers to that plane. Whereas previously they were just spirits. I don't think the spirits probably had necessarily names, but the saints kind of take on those spiritual names. Most common one that I see would be Saint Anthony of Padua, which was the patron saint of the Congo. So with New Orleans being a heavily Congo descent city, that's where those kind of synchronization happens. Those two deities just kind of line up. Saints of the Congan people, we're going to talk to him. He's going to go bring the message to our Congan ancestors. Yeah. So we kind of covered some bases on what voodoo, kind of the layout of the spirituality side of it is. You want to talk about like practices, like what a voodoo ritual would kind of look like?
It's pretty, like in reading about this, it's pretty cool seeing how it's very concrete. So there's like a start and there's a finish, yes, like with like the ritual process. Mm-hmm. So it kind of goes through this like cycle of things, which if you look at like a lot of other spiritual religions, especially ones that are very like based in like shamans are, seen as like a human embodiment of a link between our mortal world and like the spiritual world, mm-hmm, like the realm of the gods. So with voodoo, you have these deities or these spirits that are acting as like the mediaries between, humans and the gods. Shamans have often looked at as like that human embodiment of that. So with voodoo,
kind of like you can equate it to like the Pope in a way, because the Pope is the person you talk to who talks to God.
In a way.
So the shaman is kind of bridging that gap a little bit.
Sort of in a way, yeah. Like I think with like the more shamanistic like religions out there, I'm not sure if like in Catholicism the Pope is seen as like a like he is an intermediary, I guess. Like, like mm-hmm, the closest thing that we have in human form to talk to like God in Catholicism.
Right.
I think with shamans, it's kind of like a step further where it's almost like if you look at the path to become a shaman, you almost essentially kind of lose yourself. Okay. Like it's like a complete breakdown of who you are. And like a shaman goes through this like process and they're kind of reborn and they're kind of imbued with like, okay, they are now like a manifestation of these like living spirits like within them.
Right. Which I kind of find interesting because with like how we're saying Catholicism and voodoo go hand in hand, at least in New Orleans culture. I think it's really funny how, or not really funny, but interesting how the juxtaposition of possession being a terrible thing in Catholicism. That's like the worst thing that can happen, as opposed to voodoo, where you're possessed by one of these spirits. That's a good thing. That's one of the spirits of your ancestors coming to possess your body. And
it's the intent behind it. Like you're trying and it's not just with like, voodoo. There are other shamanistic religions out there.
Right.
That is the reason why a shaman exists. It is like a physical manifestation of the spirits and the gods living, or they're a vessel essentially.
Yeah.
Like possession is like actually a pretty common thing because they're trying to get that message, from the gods to the whoever, that seeks out the shaman.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of interesting how who was in Greek mythology the oracle.
Oh, okay, like in 300.
Yeah, basically that. Yeah, where it's like what I saw. Which it's a little side. I saw this thing where recently where they were the actual oracle site. There may be evidence that there were like fumes because they talk about it. They were breathing in these
like toxic like volcano shit or something like that.
Breathing in fumes.
Well, I always thought that was pretty much the basis of it anyway. They would get these little, or not little, but like teenage girls and then just feed them a bunch of psychedelic mushrooms.
Yeah, they was just like they're tripping balls or whatever. And they're like, oh God, they're talking to the gods. Well, they're fucking high as a kite. Like he just
they're flying high, baby.
It's like you just gave her a whole plate of magic brownies.
Sent her to a Peter Frampton concert. Come on, man.
What do you think's going to happen? Of course she's going to be talking to God. But so like with shamans, essentially it's like that. That's like you said, it's the intent, which it is very interesting, where possession is like kind of very frowned upon in Catholicism.
It's not frowned upon, it's bad.
It's like
that shit's bad.
It's like,
have you ever seen The Exorcist? That shit's bad.
It's like, so we called out the professional. He did an investigation. Y'all got demons.
You got ghosts in your blood.
You got some demons.
So what we're going to need you to do is just go ahead and take this cross and throw some holy water, and we're gonna peace out. We're gonna head down the street.
We got to call in the big boys. So somebody will get a phone call in about 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
6 to 8 business days.
6 to 8 business days. Hey man, this is Well, you think you're anyone possessed? You think we got demons here?
This is a popular time of year to get possessed, man. I don't know what to tell you. We're up to our ankles here.
It's like, got to fill out a requisition form, then we got to get that approved.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine that? Just a law office just strictly for possession paperwork.
Have you seen? Well,
have you had the priest revocation permit yet?
Have you? There's a show. It's on. If you have Prime, it might be on Netflix now. Mayfair Witches.
I haven't heard of it. No.
So yeah, it's on. I think it's on Amazon, but
it's on a streaming service of some sort.
Something like that. Yeah.
Whichever streaming service decides they want to pick up our podcast full time.
Yeah,
that's out there.
Netflix, Hulu, and
Tubi. We'll even take Tubi.
Yeah. Yeah. But basically that's what it is. Like the one chick, she's like this witch and she's like realizing that her powers are starting to awaken or whatever. And she has a guardian and turns out like she starts figuring this out. She calls this number and it's like this corporate thing. And yeah, like, oh, let me look at your record. And it's like a law office essentially. And there's like a file on her. And there's this like guy that's been watching over her for years. And it's like the bureau basically.
That sounds like Sabrina, the Teenage Witch. I feel like that was a kind of a thing.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like this like pristine building. It's like they have like a secretary and she's like pulling out like, yeah, I was like, this is like, but basically, yeah, that.
Anyways.
Yeah. Got off on a tangent. Practices. So for voodoo ritual, there's essentially 4 parts to it: preparation, invocation, possession, and farewell. It starts with like a song. If that's what I'm understanding, it's like a song that's like sung.
It seems to me that there's each part has its own separate song.
Okay, so a lot of chanting and
drums,
which that is
ritualistic
so common.
Drums, and
that's so common amongst like all like shamanistic, possession based rituals. There's something about a drum beat that kind of just gets people like chanting or whatever. And some of these they can go for like hours.
Yeah,
hours.
Yeah. This is an event when it happens.
Yeah, it's kind of a big deal. The rituals of Louisiana voodoo are based on African traditions. Especially, with Roman Catholic influences, reflecting the Roman Catholic influence. Some recorded ceremonies have begun with the recitation of the Apostles' Creed and prayers to the Virgin Mary. So
basically the songs are being used to open the gates between the deities and the human world to invite a spirit to come in and possess somebody.
I mean, that's pretty wild. That's intense. It'd be pretty cool to witness.
As long as you're not the one getting possessed.
I mean,
you're just a random bystander walking by, and all of a sudden you just get possessed by some ancestor of these voodoo practitioners.
Like if you say the wrong word, like does it get deflected and like what if it just like shoots over the shaman and lands at some guy across the street trying to eat his
like working in a Taco Bell.
Just like some 18-year-old kid minding his own business and just like taking orders and
his eyes just roll backwards in his head.
It just starts like fritzing out like in like the middle of like the drive-thru.
And I like the idea that it's an ancestor they're trying to reach to. This ancestor has no idea what it's like to work in a Taco Bell. It doesn't even know what it is. Where am I? What is this place?
You would think that would be the case. Like pretty much. Did you see anything on like altars and like offerings and things like that? I thought this was interesting how a lot of like the offerings to these saints were kind of similar to some of the things I saw growing up. As like if you've ever been like a Spanish store, you have like the candles. Like
with the pictures of the pictures and all Virgin Mary.
Exactly. Pretty similar from what I can understand, and a lot of it kind of does come from like different traditions or whatever. So it's kind of imbued.
Yeah, from what I've seen is mostly that contemporary practitioners have their own personal altars, usually in kitchens or living rooms. Altars are understood as assisting communication with their ancestors, with food and drink being offered to the ancestors. So some 21st century practitioners of Louisiana voodoo do sacrifice animals in their rites, subsequently cooking and eating the meat. So I guess they're sacrificing it kind of like a prayer. You kill, bless this food as we prepared kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing. That makes sense.
So as long as you're not just killing an animal just to kill it, you're actually eating it.
They're eating it. There's a purpose behind it.
Yeah, you're offering it to.
But I get what you're saying. The way that it's kind of worded, and like the research and all that, it kind of makes it seem like they're just slaughtering a chicken for the sake of slaughtering it. Here you go. Like,
at least, and that's how it seems like Haitian voodoo still tends to happen. They're just slaughtering the chicken, leaving it at an altar, and walking away kind of thing.
Which makes sense that nowadays, I mean, I would imagine like food's not cheap. Yeah. Why? I would be mad. Like if I was a practitioner, hierarchy practitioner, And they slaughtered a whole pig and they didn't do anything.
Yeah, right.
They just left it. What do you mean you just left a pig there?
And I would have to wonder as well. I mean, so you're thinking if this practitioner happened early on in Louisiana voodoo history, these are mostly all enslaved people. Could you imagine an enslaved person finding an animal on the plantation or on the farm and just randomly killing it and leaving it somewhere? I feel like the slaves would all just get beat for it or punished in some way.
Punished, like if you, like, hey, who killed, the slave.
Like that's our property. Like you're not allowed to.
Yeah, you're not allowed to, exactly. Yeah, I'm not too well versed in like the history of sacrifices, but
so I think that's kind of a thing
that
of the
makes
past.
sense. Yeah.
It's
like
more Haitian and traditional African voodoo. Although there's little proof that human sacrifice took place in Louisiana voodoo, persistent rumors claim that white children were being abducted and killed during some of its rites. That sounds to me like just some straight up,
that's crowd control. Yeah, that's because you got to think back in the early, 19th century. So because jazz was actually frowned upon heavily.
Oh yeah,
and it was like considered the devil's music or whatever.
Yeah.
And
jazz, blues.
Exactly.
That stuff,
and that was also like if you listen to this, that's the devil's music, and that's so the
rock and roll music up into the 50s and 60s was the devil's music.
That was demonized, and
but to go to that point, slave owners would, if they wouldn't let the enslaved people keep their cultures and traditions in fear that it would create an uprising.
Sure.
So they kind of tried to silence all that, tried to weed it out, and that's how the Roman Catholicism got introduced. Hey, if you're all on our side here of the religious aspect, you're not going to riot against us because we're all practicing the same thing.
Yeah.
So to that extent, that's probably how some of the traditions and stuff get skewed and mixed up and, like we were saying earlier,
assimilated into the. And I wonder, is it the same for? No, I guess not. I would say like Native American culture.
That was an influence.
Was it like?
From what I understood, it was like how the hexes and curses and stuff like that. How that kind of got introduced to voodoo culture was Native American practices in that sense as well.
Sure.
And like herbology, mixing potions and herbs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think Native American culture had an influence on that aspect.
Yeah.
But again, it's like Native American, African, and Spanish France influence all put together in this one religion.
Which is not surprising because, I mean, there's like Dominican voodoo as well.
No, I'm sure.
And, with the Dominican Republic, a Spanish country, like a Hispanic country. But I'm not surprised because it's kind of out in the Caribbean.
Mm-hmm.
So anywhere, Panama the same way, anyway, they're like in the Caribbean, Central America, a lot of those island port countries or whatever are, I'm sure, have some form of roots or a history of voodoo. Because with the slave trade and everything, it would not surprise me the least that there's some remnant of, with all those islands. You could probably find it in like the Virgin Islands and St. Croix and St. Thomas or whatever. You know?
When you go on your cruise, you probably find it down there somewhere.
Maybe, yeah. So we talked about the altars and
like you said, it kind of equated to like, I mean, I'm sure your mom or grandmother at some point in your life had an altar, little like prayer altar to, I'm just imagining what your grandmother's prayer altar would look like with the little Virgin Mary candle and the cross,
candles, the
Bible,
cross,
picture of Jesus.
Yep. They have grandma, both my grandmas, like they had that. And then like because they were Catholic, so they had, like the candles, they had the rosaries and all that. And they would light the candles and they would sit there and pray to the Virgin Mary and the saints and all that.
Yeah. So I think the voodoo altars are more kind of like that, but not necessarily just religious aspect. Could be anything. It could be anything to help you summon spirits. Yep. Looks like plates of food could be left out and circled in a ring of coins, and libations may be poured. So let's get hammered, drunk, and summon some spirits.
Baron Tomedy, Papa Legba, they're huge fans of rum.
Yeah.
So
white rum.
White rum. You leave out rum.
Leave out a cigar and a white rum.
Yeah. Cigars and like they will be in your favor. This is Davidoff.
Finally, I made a taste.
Civilized. I like you. What can I do you for?
And probably the most common or most popular practitioner of voodoo was the famous New Orleans resident Marie Laveau.
Ooh, tell me more about Marie Laveau. She sounds fancy as fuck.
She was. She was born in 1801. Pretty much brought voodoo culture to New Orleans. Okay. Of course, she wasn't responsible for it because at that age, it was already been a thing, but she definitely brought it to like a mainstream platform.
So, okay, so fast forward. So Voodoo's been, when was she? Like,
she was born in 1801.
So the slave trade's been here for at least 100. That was like started in what, the 1700s? So by that time, Voodoo's been around for probably a hot minute.
Oh, yeah. It's been around at least probably 50, 60 years.
Okay. And then, but she brings it to like the mainstream platform. She kind of popularizes it.
Correct.
Okay.
So, yeah. So Marie Laveau, she was born a free woman of color in New Orleans in the French Quarter, which is the best part of New Orleans, if you ask me, because it's where all the cool stuff is. And it's like that's like where Bourbon Street and stuff is.
Okay.
Of course, that's the most touristy part, but the French Quarter is also where everything happens.
Is that like the really expensive part of town, like the bougie part?
No, that would be the Garden District.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, that's where all the celebrities. But she was a free woman of color. She was descendant of, kind of contradicts itself. Nobody really knows what her family lineage is.
Sure.
But believed to be of African, European, and Native American ancestry. So she was always described as having nice features, which back then meant she looked like a white woman.
Sure.
Okay. But she was curly black hair, claimed, golden skin. So she was a very attractive person by, standards back then. She married Jacques Paris in 1819, a free man of color who also was in New Orleans at the time. He ended up abandoning her or leaving in some fashion. Nobody really knows what happened after they had 2 children. They both assumed to have died in childhood. And then after that, that's when Laveau started really practicing voodoo because her mother practiced it. It was a kind of a childhood thing. But you kind of fast forward, she remarries again, ends up having like 15 kids.
Good Lord.
Presumably. Supposedly had 15 kids.
Okay.
She was actually a devout Catholic at one point as well. A reporter from the New Orleans Republican detailed one such visit in an article published in 1871 in which he described Laveau as a devout and acceptable member of the Catholic Communion. When she died, they actually only had a Catholic funeral for her. But again, she was the most popular person in voodoo. So she was considered a healer, an herbalist, and an entrepreneur. She was kind of in all aspects of New Orleans culture, politics, medicines, stuff like that. She was started out as a beauty parlor hairdresser for the wealthy families of New Orleans, and then kind of used that as a platform to start making her way into the public elite. So she would use like the gossip and stuff from the beauty parlor to kind of make her case that she was clairvoyant. So she would hear what these other people were saying. Yeah, she was kind of like
a businesswoman. Like
exactly. She was
business savvy.
The best way to kind of describe what Marie Laveau is she was part supernatural, part brilliant, part politician. She used the negative stigma around what voodoo culture was in New Orleans at the time, where it was more of a black magic, mixed with her business acumen of being a good politician,
her status,
being like, hey, I've got some dirt on this person. So like, oh, Nick's, cheated on his taxes this year. I know that because this person said this about him at the beauty parlor.
And but how I'm going to present it.
But I'm going to, exactly. I don't know, quote unquote, I don't know that Nick did that. So the next time that I see him, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to curse you with this thing unless you come out and say that you cheated on your taxes, because I'm a clairvoyant and I know that you did that. And you would be like, nobody else knows that. How did you know that? Yeah. Kind of thing. So she would use her dark power, quote unquote, as a means to uplift her in the
or essentially
social psyche.
Or essentially she was able to turn the stigma associated with black magic and voodoo to her advantage. And through that was able to elevate her own social status.
Yes.
Okay.
And she also was one of you were talking about Grigris earlier.
Yeah.
She was one of the first ones to start promoting the use of those. So she kind of brought that into public eye as well, started selling them as charms and selling them as pendants and things to the wealthy white people who would see her and want to be a part of the practice.
I don't hey, look, man. I don't want any trouble.
Yeah, exactly. So in her role as a voodoo practitioner, customers would often come to her for help with family disputes, health, finances, and other things. She would perform her services in 3 main places: her home on St. Anne Street, and within Congo Square, and at Lake Pontchartrain. She would have these public voodoo sessions every Sunday in Congo Square, which was at the time a place of where enslaved people could go, and it was kind of like a day off. They could go to the big square, practice they would sell deep fried rice cakes covered in sugar, which I think is a precursor to what beignets ended up becoming.
Yeah, okay.
And if you've never had a beignet, shame on you, because beignets are fucking awesome. But it was kind of like a social spectacle. So they would go out and white people, eventually the ritzy, wealthy white people would come out and be like, oh, look at what they're doing out in the square today. Let's go take a watch. Yeah. And so they would, but Marie Laveau was like the leader of this big practice in Congo Square. So she would do that every Sunday. And that's how her political image and her public presence, I guess I should say, really exploded in New Orleans. And that's how she was known around town as like the voodoo queen. She would also carry around a boa constrictor or a python around her neck because that started becoming associated with voodoo as well. I guess a lot of people would assume that voodoo and snakes kind of coincide with each other.
Sure.
Because in, I think, African voodoo, the deities were represented by snakes. I believe I remember
if you look
seeing
up images of the Loa, like how they're depicted in like African, like Haitian voodoo, they're often depicted as like snake spirits. Like,
yeah. Mm-hmm. And then so she would wear a python around her neck that was supposedly a deity, and his name was Zombie, which is kind of cool. Kind of a cool name, which we'll talk about a little bit
Zombies
at the end of this. Yeah. Like I said, she pretty much brought the public image to what modern day voodoo, like the touristy version of what voodoo is, to the mainstream. Again, her political prowess, public presence was able to really garner a name for herself. There was one instance that I was talking about a little bit earlier. She had a very wealthy man come to her whose son was being tried for a crime that he committed. And apparently every piece of evidence went against him. And he was like, I'll do whatever it takes to get my son off of this crime. So he goes to Marie Laveau. She's like, okay, let me see what I can do. What's in it for me? He apparently promises her a house, a very nice house. And so she does the thing where I said the hot peppers, which again, I think is just putting something in a fire and putting it in your mouth and like causing self-torture, essentially, to call out to the spirits. Supposedly she took the day of the trial, took the peppers out of her mouth, put them under the seat of the judge, and the judge let the kid off scot-free, got him out of it. So there's some speculation that whatever she did worked. There's also some speculation that she had some sort of blackmail against the judge that she threatened him with.
Oh yeah. She probably had some dirt on him. Mm-hmm. Put the peppers under the seat as like a sign of, hey, we know. We know what you did.
Yeah, it could have been. But again, it could have been one of those things where he sees the peppers and he's believing that she's going to curse him.
That's what I'm saying. Like she logically possibly had some dirt on him. He doesn't know that though.
Very much so.
But he sees the peppers and maybe by association of maybe misconception.
Seeing a gree there.
Yeah. And like, oh man, this is that black magic stuff. Yeah. Like, all right, fine. You're free to go.
So she ended up passing away June 15th, 1881 at the age of 79. She is now buried in the New Orleans Cemetery. You can actually go visit. And it's actually funny. There's some like speculation that it's haunted. Of course, going through that graveyard, you see her ghost, here and there. Nicolas Cage, I think, actually bought a plot right behind her to be buried in or something like that. And it's like a supposedly cursed gravesite because it's like Marie Laveau's gravesite or something like that. I'd have to look into that, but I remember seeing something about that.
Why there of all places?
Because what do you mean there of all places?
No.
For Nick Cage?
For Nick Cage. Why?
Because he's weird.
Yeah, okay. That's good enough for me. You're right. You're not wrong there. He is quite an eccentric dude.
So tourists continue to visit. Supposedly her plot has been 347 in St. Louis Cemetery, number 1 in New Orleans. Tourists continue to visit and mark X's with a decades-old tradition that if people wanted Laveau to grant them a wish, they had to draw 3 X's on the tomb, turn around 3 times, knock on the tomb, yell out their wish, and if it was granted, come back, circle their X, and leave Laveau an offering. So if you plan on doing that, good luck. That's a lot of...
I think in that situation, I'm just going to let bygones be bygones. And you know what?
Here we go. As of March 1st, 2015, there is no longer public access to the St. Louis Cemetery. So there you go. You got to have a tour guide because apparently it was getting out of control.
Okay, yeah.
But that's Marie Laveau in a nutshell. Born a free woman of color, brought prominence to what we would probably closely associate what voodoo is in the pop culture, and then used her political power to pretty much make a really good name or life for herself. It's kind of an American success story in a way. Being born a person of color in 1801, I mean, you're still at the height of the slave industry. And of course, her being a free woman at birth helped, but even then.
And the fact that she didn't really resemble
a traditional
African slave.
She didn't look like Harriet Tubman.
Exactly. So she probably, I don't want to say it was easier for her, but it probably was like
easier to ingrain herself into the wealthy elites.
Yeah, and so good for her. I think she does make an appearance in American Horror Story as well. Her history, like they talk about her, I think.
Yep, she was heavily fictionalized Marie Laveau, played by Angela Bassett, who was awesome. She's
actress.
She's in Black Panther. She's like T'Challa's mom.
Oh yeah, that was her. Yeah.
I just see we watched Vampire in Brooklyn yesterday. Yeah. Eddie Murphy's like 1995 vampire film. If you've never seen it, it's a fucking trip. Yeah. But she plays like the love interest in that. So,
is that what it is?
Yeah. But yeah, she's in American Horror Story Coven and American Horror Story Apocalypse.
Yep. So let's go ahead and pivot here and conclude with the voodoo.
With the voodoo zombies?
Voodoo zombies.
Yeah.
So when I hear zombies, I think of the traditional Walking Dead, body decaying, instant craving for blood and flesh and rotting and brains. I don't know where the whole brain thing came from, but that's what I think of when
I feel like that was a Night of the Living Dead thing.
Yeah, I remember watching that movie, but even in that film, I don't recall there ever being an instance where they're like, they're going to eat your brains. Or like zombies, like say brains. I don't remember that.
I don't know. It's probably just one of those things that gets
like telephone game kind of like through
you just assume zombies eat brains, and then all of a sudden that's all. Yeah,
they'll eat your brains. Like, well, I got a joke.
They're gonna eat your grains. What did he say? Brains?
Oh, God, not my brains. Like,
no, I'm just here to eat your wheat, man. Like, I'm here for your grain.
Well, I got news for you, pal.
Shotgun shell right to the fucking head, bro.
If you're here for my brains, you're gonna be starving because not a whole lot going on, buddy.
Sorry to any Brooklyners that Nick just offended by not having any brains in his New York accent.
It's like, no Einstein's here, man.
What are you looking for, boss? The guy here says he's here to eat brains. Oh, good thing we don't have to worry about that, huh?
Yeah, like, I don't know where the whole brain thing came from, but.
So zombies in voodoo culture mostly comes from Haitian voodoo. So kind of pivoting away a little bit from Louisiana voodoo, but they're essentially reanimated corpses that are controlled by a sorcerer or a witch called a bokor. The bokor uses zombies for labor or other purposes. So basically, it's not what you would typically think in like a necromancy sense, where they're bringing a person back to life or anything like that, or Last of Us, where they eat a fungus and the fungus kills them and then turns them into zombies, anything like that.
It's more of like a mind control thing, right? Where they essentially are possessing another human being.
They give them a potion, essentially, to put the victim into a coma-like state, making them appear dead. And then from there, they would use a mixture of herbs, human remains, and animal parts, called a coup de poudre. I hope I'm saying that right, but it's a quote-unquote powder strike. Uses blood and hair from the victims, and then basically they use them to do labor, do their bidding, do whatever they want them to do, but they're not dead. And usually the Hungan and the Mambo are the formal voodoo religion's positions that oppose the Bokor. So they're the only ones that can bring people back from their zombie states.
Okay.
And that is kind of touched upon in the movie White Zombie from back in 1913, I believe. One of those early 1900s movies.
1932 film White Zombie.
White Zombie, yeah. I knew it was a 3 in there somewhere. Yeah. They kind of use that as a platform for what we would now know as modern day zombies. So zombie culture can all be traced back to Haitian voodoo.
It says the Haitian zombie phenomenon first attracted widespread international attention during the United States occupation of Haiti from 1915 to 1934, when a number of case histories of purported zombies began to emerge. The first popular book covering the topic was William Seabrook's The Magic Island in 1929. Seabrook cited Article 246 of the Haitian Criminal Code, which was passed in 1864, asserting that it was an official recognition of zombies. And of course, this, like you mentioned, this passage was later used in promotional materials for the 1932 film White Zombie. So I'm wondering what this like criminal code was. So, so it looks like there at one point in time it was frowned upon for them for Haiti, I guess for Haiti
to make zombies.
Yeah, and honestly, like we were talking about earlier, it was more or less probably like a thing of like crowd control. So let's let's go ahead and like get rid of all of these like traditional practices and kind of imbue like Catholicism, like the whole slave thing or whatever. Mm-hmm. So yeah, maybe that was the thing that they were like practicing, cursing and like we're gonna fucking zombify your ass.
Turn you into a fucking zombie, bro.
Like you're fucking Don't dead, bro. Don't fuck with me. And okay, well, let's outlaw it. Okay, you can't do that anymore. So let's pass this criminal code. And so interesting. I would have never guessed that. I guess that was like a voodoo thing.
Yeah.
I honestly didn't know where the whole zombie thing came from.
Well, now you know. Here's something kind of interesting as well. The Haitian tradition also includes an incorporeal type of zombie, the zombie astral, which is a part of the human soul. A Bakor can capture a zombie astral to enhance its spiritual power. A zombie astral can also be sealed inside a specially decorated bottle by a Bakor and sold to a client to bring luck, healing, or business success. It is believed that God eventually will reclaim the zombie's soul, so the zombie is a temporary spiritual entity.
So I could pay X amount of dollars.
Top dollar.
For a bottle that has the soul of an individual
that will bring you luck.
Do you get to pick the soul?
It doesn't say. Maybe you can pick. Maybe you can pick the soul that will bring you what you want. Maybe like if you want your business to succeed, they have a specific one for that. Or if you want your crops to grow bigger, you have a specific one for that.
But
or if you're trying to like hit your bets on your parlay, you got one for that.
But what if? Okay, that part's cool. I get the logistics of that. I understand that. But where is this soul coming from, though? Is it somebody who's already like passed, or is it some rando on the street? Like if I want like my business to improve, and they do this whole charm thing, this whole zombification process, is it just sucking the soul off some random Wall Street executive into this bottle? Like dude just drops dead at his desk in New York. Here you go, and it's like this will temporarily, and then like I'm just thriving in my business.
Could be. It just says it's a part of a human soul. So it could be just as simple as like doing a ritual and taking part of your soul and you go back to, and then eventually you're like, you die and you're like, no shit, what do I do now? Because I don't have a soul or part of it's not there. So I can't go to heaven, can't go to hell, can't do anything.
Like,
and eventually God comes and it's like, hey, here's your soul back.
Because like, what if this is like in the 80s, right?
And people are just getting their souls sucked out every other night.
Well, like I get this, Wall Street executive soul in this bottle, but this person's also like a raging coke addict. So like, yeah, my business.
You're not drinking the potion. I don't think it's just a talisman. Essentially, it's just a bottle you put on your shelf and be like, here, this is supposed to bring me luck.
But I feel like that would imbue, like you would, that person's soul, that quality, like it's improving your own fortune and luck through your own actions and behavior. At least that's how I'm thinking that would work. You put this thing on your shelf and your business is thriving because you're making better business decisions.
And all of a sudden you're like, man, I need to fucking
coke. Or like he's like a porn addict or something. And
or both.
Oh God.
A raging coke porn addict.
And you can't stop whacking it till
you're doing a line and then you're just
like blowing loads all over your fancy desk or whatever. But hey, at least you
just made
a killing in profits this month.
Net profit of up $4.5 million in the last 3 years.
Like you were thriving,
but your wife left you because you're addicted to coke and porn.
Like, so is that how that works? Because that doesn't really sound like a good deal. Like, I think I'll just take my chances with
just make it on your own, man.
Make it on your own. Like at the end of the, am I broke? Absolutely. But hey, at least I'm
not spending thousands of dollars on coke and porn subscriptions.
Yeah, there you go. You know what? Why? Because that soul is not on my shelf.
And also I can get porn for free.
Like coke, not so much, but
sure, I have a coke addiction. Coca-Cola, a refreshing drink.
I'd rather be addicted to Coca-Cola than cocaine. So yeah, those are the questions that I have.
Yeah, well,
these are the things you got to consider if you want to invoke.
If we have any Haitian zombie voodoo practitioners out there that can answer this question for us, please feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, exactly.
And give us the answers to what these potions, if you're supposed to drink them or if they just go on your shelf as a little prize.
Because if you're like, you got to drink it, that's a whole nother, like, and I don't know whose soul am I drinking?
That, and if it's like one of the potions to turn people into zombies, like if it's a potion like that where it's part blood and animal remains and hair and stuff, like you can't drink that, right?
I mean, you could, but then on top of that, these practitioners are people too. Like, what if they make a mistake? What if this is supposed to be it's supposed to bring you like good fortune and all that. But I don't know, maybe they didn't get enough sleep the night before. And in this invocation, where they should have, said this phrase, they accidentally missay it and they say this phrase. And then you wake up and now you're bald.
I guess, that's the risk.
Or your dick falls off.
Now that would be the worst. That's definitely worse of the two.
Like, it's like, it's like these are the variables that
if you're going to dabble, you got to go full dick out or full dick off.
I will.
If you're that desperate to seek out a zombie practitioner of voodoo.
You're right. You're absolutely right. That is something to consider from like that perspective. If you're the kind of person who's like reaching out to a practitioner of voodoo, you're probably going through some shit that, like
if you're willing to even consider having a zombie potion.
Yeah, I got you. I can empathize with that. Hey man, you're going through some shit. Yeah. Like, just call me though before you make that decision.
Before you book that flight to New Orleans or Haiti,
just call me. Let's talk about it. Like, let's look at all your options.
Reel it in.
I'm not telling you to not go through with it. I'm just saying before you go through with it,
could potentially have your dick fall off.
Like your dick is on the line. And I would much rather have the phone call of, hey, I might be going to New Orleans to do this, rather than getting the phone call, Nick, my dick's gone.
What do I do?
What do you mean it's gone? I woke up. Yeah. It was there last night when I checked. I woke up this morning. It's not there now.
Gone. Just a
completely gone.
Just a small chub.
But my bank account is perfect today.
It's flourishing.
I've got 6 figures in my bank, all zeros, but I got 6 figures.
I spent a whole lot of money in New Orleans.
Like, okay, yeah. So let's call your friends before you take the plunge.
Yeah. And again, one last thing we'll touch on is voodoo dolls, which is another misconception.
I thought that was new to me too.
Yeah, voodoo dolls apparently are not a thing in at least Louisiana voodoo culture. They're not used. They're not sanctioned. Don't go seeking out a voodoo doll because they don't work, or they're not a thing in voodoo culture.
I thought it was actually pretty interesting how the voodoo community is flat out saying like, hey, like, this is not a thing. Like, we don't encourage this. It's pretty bad from like Hollywood's perspective. Yeah. If you have actual practitioners saying stop.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's basically what happened was the voodoo doll was, like we were saying, like Gree-Grees.
Yeah.
They were used as kind of a indication of what this black voodoo curse magic can be. They can curse you to, if they have a piece of your hair and it's on this doll and they stick you with a pin, it's going to hurt. That's not the case. Voodoo is, like we were saying earlier, it's more of a way to associate with your ancestors and more of a spiritual way. Voodoo dolls weren't really popularized until Hollywood got a hold of it in 1940s. Book was written, which we were talking about a little bit before. John Huston Craig in 1933 wrote a book called Black Baghdad, The Arabian Nights Adventure of a Marine Captain in Haiti.
It just sounds so cool. I want to read this story.
Where he wrote about a Haitian prisoner described sticking pins into an effigy to induce illness. So the voodoo doll just kind of gained steam from there. Shows up in, like we were saying, White Zombie, I Walked with a Zombie in 1943. Of course, Creepshow from 1982. Indiana Jones and Temple of Doom. Child's Play, which is Chucky. Voodoo dolls used in Chucky.
Classic.
And of course, the best movie of all time, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island.
Oh, man.
1998.
That was my shit. Damn, that was a good movie.
But in 2020, Louisiana Voodoo High Priestess Roby Gilmore stated, "It blows my mind that people still believe voodoo dolls are relevant to voodoo religion. We do not stab pins in dolls to hurt people. We don't take your hair and make a doll and worship the devil with it or to get our revenge on you. It is not done, it won't be done, and it will never exist for us." So again, like you were saying, just straight out, flat out being like, just stop doing this. This isn't us. Stop doing this.
They mean business too when they're like flat out telling you that. Like, if we wanted to hurt you, I would just hurt you.
Yeah, pretty much.
I would just show up at your front door with a baseball bat.
Or
if I'm civil, I'd sue you. Legal trouble.
I feel like a lot of people would, if you were a practicing a voodoo practitioner and you wanted to make a voodoo doll of somebody, and I mean, it would be like celebrities, political people, you just see them just getting their shit wrecked on a constant basis.
Oh yeah. Like, just
flat out. Do you imagine the person that gets a piece of Donald Trump's hair and he just puts that on? Man, that motherfucker, he would be
like, just friggin', just oh my God, all kinds of havoc. If there was any truth behind that, It's really cool. Like, I mean, and maybe it's not so much in voodoo, but maybe in like witchcraft, there's like instances of like effigies and like dolls or
I'm
whatever.
sure.
I forget where I saw it, but apparently you can buy, or people have bought really old homes in like Connecticut, New Hampshire,
New England
Maine,
area,
New England and all that, where they're doing renovations in like the attics and stuff, and they go in the walls and they find like old dolls and like jars full of like nail clippings, and the idea behind it though is that from way back in the day, practitioners like they warding off, like it was like they use off wards, like
Mm-hmm.
So they would find these like jars.
Yeah,
exactly. That's what the whole thing was behind it or whatever. So I'm not surprised. I mean, I think there is some truth to the whole doll thing or whatever, but of course Hollywood
over dramatize it and make it their own thing,
which it's unfortunate for actual practitioners of voodoo.
Yeah,
it's one thing where you're trying to practice like your own, because they genuinely believe this, and I do believe that it is a source of empowerment. Mm-hmm. Good things for them.
Like I said, it's easily relatable to witchcraft. I mean, it's not a necessarily evil thing. It's just been portrayed that way in pop culture and media. Where witchcraft's bad, voodoo's bad. No, it's just people celebrating their cultures. Yeah,
practicing
in a unique way.
These things, like, these are forms of empowerment for them to better their own. But
it's deeply ingrained in their culture and to their heritage. I mean, if you practice voodoo now, I'm sure that you grew up that way, and it dates back to. I think it's older than Christianity in some ways.
I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. Like, it has to be. Because if it's originating from Africa, and these are pre-Judaic, pre-Christian religions or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. But people are fucking dumb.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh God, voodoo, black magic. Here we go. Waking up. My tire was flat.
Somebody cursed me.
Magic.
Somebody cursed me.
Cursed. And I opened up my trunk and there was a voodoo doll, and I know.
Well, then that would be creepy. That would be creepy. I'll give you that one. Well, if I woke up and I got my car and there was a voodoo doll sitting on my car seat, I'd be like, well, okay, this is weird, because I locked my car.
Yeah, just like they find any reason to. It must be up. Woke up, went to go make some breakfast, and I saw there was no oatmeal left in the pantry. It must be those
goddamn Jeffersons down the street.
Down the street.
cursing me with
their voodoo again. Like, just people.
The Jeffersons are just like the nicest people you could ever meet.
He's not even like a voodoo practitioner. No, he's like, him, that's a white guy. Like, what? Nothing about him remotely screams that he's involved in voodoo in any way. Well, I know it was him because
he went to New Orleans 3 years ago and came back a completely different person. So, yeah, you would too after 3 hand grenades on Bourbon Street, buddy.
Yeah, like, I think he was just drunk, Jerry. That's called a hangover.
New Orleans changes you, man. It changes you.
Yeah, it's just people are stupid and they will dramatize and they will run with whatever they can. So,
but it's all in good. It's all in good faith, I guess. Now that we can hopefully enlighten some people on this episode about what voodoo is and what it's about. And of course, as usual, we didn't go super deep into it. We didn't go all the way back and try to sift through every deity that we can find, because frankly, we just don't have the time.
That's like episodes among episodes. Yeah. So please, we're always going to encourage you to do your own research, and we might not always get the research right ourselves. Like it's just what we found here, and by no way are we trying to offend any like actual practitioners of voodoo. Yeah. In no way are we trying to say that what you practice is right or wrong. Mm-hmm. This is just surface level from what we've seen.
Hey, as long as you're not turning people into zombies, practice all the voodoo you want to.
Yeah. By all means, like I still want to know how that works.
You just gotta
I have so many questions.
It's going to have to be saved for another episode.
Yeah, so many questions. It's like, whose soul is that though? Like, I'll do it, but at what cost?
Maybe right before you die, I'll get you turned into a zombie soul potion bottle.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And see what happens.
Yeah, like drink it.
As long as you're okay with it.
I'm fine with it.
Okay. I have this on recording now, so
yeah.
When I bring this up to,
and does it have to be a person? Could it be the soul of an inanimate object?
I think it has to be a person.
Yeah, I guess a redwood doesn't really have a soul.
Yeah, you can't get the soul of a lamp. So that being said, thanks everyone for joining us on this episode of Shadows and Sightings. Reach out to us via email, shadowsandsightings@gmail.com, Facebook, Instagram, Shadows and Sightings, a paranormal podcast, and Shadows and Sightings pod. Thank you all for listening to our weekly episodes. We'll see you all next time we talk about all things spooky.